Let's add some style to our text. And we haven't jumped into layer styles much, but we will be covering some other layer styles in just a bit. But to add some style, just double click on this layer and you can actually open up the layer style window for any layer, including fireworks or any photo or graphic layer, but just do that for the text layer. I'm just going to move this over to the right just so I can see a little bit better. So there's different types of styles. We can do bevel and emboss, stroke, inner glow, satin, color overlay, gradient overlay, pattern overlay, outer glow, drop shadow, all kinds of cool effects. To add one of them, just select the check mark or check that box next to your option. And then you can have all sorts of different options for making this look a little bit better. So we can increase the depth of this bevel. We can change the type of bevel we want. Hold on just a second. Let me turn off this background layer and then make this background or add a little solid color so that we can see more of our text, just so that we know what's going on a little bit better. So if I select my text again, go back to my bevel and emboss, and now it's a little bit easier to see. Let me crank up the size so you can see more. And that's adding a little bit of depth. Even though it's not actual depth, it looks like a little bit of depth to this image. You can choose different techniques if you want it hard. So see here, if I choose chisel hard, it's just like a sharp line in the middle of the text. Maybe I'll even zoom in just a little bit, which I can't do without selecting OK, and then zooming into this text a little bit more. Now this text is at 200% now, so you do start to get a little bit of pixelation. Let's add a stroke to this image now. So let's add that stroke. Here we have some settings I used for a previous project, but typically your color might just be black. I don't know what it will actually be, but we're going to use some sort of fun color. So let's do like a red, yellowish orange, something like that. The size is right here. You can choose how big you want the size to be. You can choose where you want the stroke. Do you want it on the inside of the text, outer bounds? Do you want it on the center, or do you want it just on the outside? So if you put it on the center or the inside, you can see that the bevel actually affects the stroke as well. And you can even change the blend mode. So that's something to keep in mind too, because you can actually change the fill type to something like a pattern and then change the blend mode to something like overlay, and that's going to change how this looks. So let's just select OK and then turn back on our fireworks, see what this looks like. Okay, not too good yet because we don't want that overlay. We want that stroke to look a little bit more brighter. So I'm just going to leave that fireworks image like so. Go down to my stroke, which I can then re-edit. Going to change from fill type of pattern to color. Make sure that my opacity is at 100% and change from overlay to normal. That really makes that text stand out quite a bit. We can change the size of that stroke as well. The last thing we can do is add a drop shadow. Okay, I'm going to check OK right here and turn off the fireworks and actually turn off this gray background as well so that we can see more clearly what the drop shadow will do. So if I double click this again, go to drop shadow, and check that on, you see that a shadow is added. Again, this is going to be using the settings that I used in a previous project, so yours might start out a little bit different. But you can change the distance, which is actually how far is the shadow away from the text. Typically, you want it right next to it, unless you want it shining on something else in your graphic, or if you have this on a photo and you want it to look like the shadow is being portrayed on the background or something like that. The spread is also how dark versus soft it's going to be. And the size also does that. Is it going to be hard or soft? Typically like something a little bit in the middle. And you can also change the angle. So say I want to rotate the shadow so it looks like maybe the light source is coming from the bottom left. We can choose from the bottom left. So the light source now is coming from the negative 43rd degree. It really depends. Typically, your standard is right around that 140 mark. You can change the opacity. You can make it a lot more dark or a lot less dark. 35 is about the standard, but maybe you want it a little bit more dark. As you can see, I've added a lot of different styles to this text. If I want to see what it looks like with or without, I can just easily turn on and off the visibility of that effect. To delete all of the effects, we can right click and say clear layer styles. I'm going to undo that. Another cool thing is, say we add new text, and I call this grand opening. You can't see it because it's white text. But if I copy this text effect by right clicking and saying copy layer style, and then going to grand opening and right clicking and then saying paste layer style, you can see now that it has copied the same style to this text. If we want, we can then go in with our text tool and add arc to it by going to the warp text option, going to arc, and maybe just a little bit like so. And I think this needs to be a little bit smaller. So I can either select all the text and drag down the font, or I can just make a selection with my move tool, grab the edge of the bounding box and drag in, something like so. When you do make your text smaller though, the bevel and emboss and all the layer styles stay the same setting. So I might have to go ahead and open this back up, go to my stroke and make the stroke a little bit smaller. Whoops. Go back and open up my drop shadow, make that a little bit smaller, same with the spread, so that it matches this text a little bit more. Before it looked a little bit funky. So that's how you stylize your text. That's how you can copy and paste styles to text. And you can also do this with graphics. Go to your stock photos folder and you'll see this bike graphic. It's a free graphic that I found from Icon Finder. And I'm just going to move this text up just using my move tool, selecting this text, moving this up here. And now if I double click the bike graphic, this is one cool way to change the color of a graphic. You can just choose color overlay. Now go to that tab, and if I want to match it to this orange, what happens when I move my mouse over to my Photoshop file, I can click on that orange and have it match. And then I can actually go in and maybe add a stroke, but maybe a black stroke to have that outline of the bike look a little bit better. If I put this on the outside, make it super big, that's kind of a cool technique as well. I'm going to add the drop shadow, and I might have to go in there and make the shadow just a little bit bigger. Maybe something like that. Making the distance a little bit further for this graphic looks a little bit cool so we can really see it in the background. So let me just check that same bevel and emboss. And that matches the bevel and emboss of the text. So everything is more unified. Select OK. And there you can see it, that I've added those same or similar effects. And I could have just copied and pasted it, but you can add layer styles to actual graphics or even photos. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions about layer styles or stylizing text or using them, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next lesson.